On board USS Helena, American radar operators exchanged worried glances. Contacts at 27,700 yards. Could it be the Japanese fleet bearing down on Guadalcanal? 20,000 yards. 15,000. Helena warns her flagship, USS San Francisco, but San Francisco's radar shows nothing amiss. 10,000 yards, well within torpedo range. 5,000 yards, close enough to see their hulls through the darkness, yet still no permission to engage. Wondering just how close Admiral Scott is going to let the enemy vessels get, Helena's radar officer asks incredulously, quote, "What are we going to do, board them?" Little did anyone know that Scott was about to accidentally pull off one of the most perfect and deadliest maneuvers in naval strategy, but with a shocking outcome that's still debated today. The Tokyo Express. By early October 1942, the battle for Guadalcanal had become a grinding contest of attrition. The Allies had seized Henderson Field 2 months earlier, giving American aircraft control of the daytime skies. But night belonged to the Imperial Japanese Navy. Fast cruisers and destroyers moved under darkness through the narrow corridor known as the Slot, keeping Japanese ground forces supplied through near-nightly runs. The Allies called this the Tokyo Express. To the Japanese, it was a lifeline. The situation had settled into a rhythm. Japanese warships delivered men and material by night, but at a cost. Vital destroyers diverted from escort duties, with serious limitations on cargo capacity. Both sides escalated their efforts. The Japanese concentrated forces at Rabaul, preparing for a decisive push to retake Henderson Field, while the Allies rushed reinforcements to protect their foothold. Task Force 64 was formed under Rear Admiral Norman Scott to protect Allied convoys and strike back against the Tokyo Express. Admiral Scott was a career battleship officer who had spent decades studying surface tactics, earning a reputation as a serious, disciplined commander. Trim and ramrod straight, Scott always appeared crisply uniformed, projecting the image of a textbook naval officer. The stakes were clear. Since August, the Allies had suffered repeated losses in night battles, including the devastating defeat at Savo Island, without sinking a single Japanese vessel in return. Scott's strategy hinged on using radar to strike first, fast and hard, before the Japanese could react. Success depended on tight coordination and speed in the chaos of night combat. As Scott's ships moved into position south of Guadalcanal, Japanese forces launched another major run. Vice Admiral Jojima led the main reinforcement group, consisting of 2 seaplane tenders and 6 destroyers loaded with troops, howitzers, field guns, and anti-aircraft weapons. His objective was to land vital reinforcements on Guadalcanal under cover of darkness. To clear the way, Rear Admiral Goto advanced ahead with a bombardment group of 3 heavy cruisers, Aoba, Furutaka, and Kinugasa, and 2 destroyers, Fubuki and Hatsuki. Their task was to strike Henderson Field and draw American attention away from Jojima's landing force. Admiral Aritomo Goto was a stern, disciplined officer, known for his aggressive tactics, confidence, and belief in the Imperial Navy's doctrine of swift, decisive strikes. Physically imposing and stern-faced, Goto carried himself with the rigid bearing expected of a Japanese flag officer. The IJN expected no resistance. Until now, no Allied surface force had challenged the Tokyo Express at night. Recon and radars. On October 11, 1942, at 8 a.m., Vice Admiral Jojima's reinforcement group departed from the Shortland Islands. The seaplane tenders carried crucial supplies, while 6 destroyers formed a protective screen. The newest destroyer, Akizuki, featured advanced dual-purpose 100mm guns and sophisticated fire control systems. 6 hours later, around 2 p.m., Rear Admiral Goto's bombardment group followed behind. 3 heavy cruisers, each armed with 10 8-inch guns, capable of hurling 2 50-pound shells over 17 miles, would pound Henderson Field, while Jojima's forces delivered reinforcements. After weeks of successful night operations, both Japanese commanders had grown overconfident. They believed American radar was still primitive and unreliable, never suspecting that several U.S. cruisers now carried advanced SG radar sets tracking them in real time. That afternoon, the Japanese launched air support missions. A sweep of 17 Mitsubishi Zeros crossed Henderson Field, drawing no response. Later, 45 Betty bombers escorted by 30 Zeros attacked, triggering a furious dogfight. One Betty crashed in flames, while 2 American fighters were torn apart mid-air. Henderson Field remained operational. Throughout the afternoon, Zeros continued flying protective missions. The final group maintained cover until sunset, then ditched at sea as planned, awaiting destroyer rescue. All 6 aircraft splashed into the water. 5 pilots were lost. At 2:45 p.m., Allied reconnaissance aircraft sighted what they believed were 2 cruisers and 6 destroyers heading down the slot. In reality, they'd spotted Vice Admiral Jojima's reinforcement group, 2 large seaplane tenders accompanied by 6 destroyers. From the air, the tender's size and profile resembled that of cruisers, leading to a critical misidentification. As a result, Allied commanders assumed this was the main threat. They remained unaware that Rear Admiral Goto's heavier bombardment group, 3 actual cruisers and 2 destroyers, was following behind. Scott immediately steered his task force toward Guadalcanal. Though his ships carried radar and heavier firepower, they lacked battle cohesion and night-biting experience. Scott chose to command from the heavy cruiser San Francisco, the more prestigious vessel. This traditional choice carried a critical disadvantage. San Francisco had the older SC radar, significantly less capable than the SG sets on the light cruisers Helena and Boise. The technological difference was profound. SG radar used microwave frequencies for precise surface target resolution, providing greater range, accuracy, and performance near coastlines. The SC radar relied on longer wavelengths with broader beams, making it difficult to distinguish between ship types with precision. In practical terms, Helena and Boise could see sharp, detailed target profiles, while Scott's flagship showed only vague blobs. Sailing blind. Scott's battle plan was straightforward but aggressive. His 5 ships would sail in a single-file column, destroyers leading and trailing, cruisers in the middle. The forward destroyers would be the first to detect enemy ships using radar. On contact, they were to switch on searchlights, fire illumination rounds, and launch torpedoes. More importantly, the cruisers, positioned for maximum firepower, would not wait for commands. They were to open fire the moment targets were lit, aiming to break up any Japanese formation before it could react. For additional visibility, Scott ordered float planes launched ahead. These scouts would patrol around Savo Island, dropping flares over enemy ships to guide American gunners. By 10 p.m., near Cape Hunter, the launches began. Planes splashed into the sea, one after another. One aircraft stalled after takeoff, crashing off the starboard beam. The other 2 climbed into the darkness, becoming unseen sentinels over the battlefield. Meanwhile, Jojima's group hugged Guadalcanal's north coast, moving silently just offshore. The seaplane tenders offloaded troops and supplies, while the destroyers stood watch, all without encountering resistance. Lookout spotted the American float planes, but raised no alarms. No response came. Doctrine demanded stealth, and they assumed the Americans wouldn't dare strike at night. Jojima would even radio Goto with a routine report. No American surface ships detected. Goto acknowledged and pressed on in standard cruising formation, expecting a clear run to Henderson Field. His bombardment group, following close behind the transports, received no warning of what lay ahead. Earlier, Allied reconnaissance had made a critical error. They mistook Jojima's slower seaplane tenders for heavy cruisers and completely missed Goto's group. To American eyes, it looked like a Japanese surface force preparing for battle. That misreading shaped Scott's response as he turned Task Force 64 northeast to intercept. Just past Cape Esperance at 10:33 p.m., Scott's column shifted to battle formation. Destroyers Fahrenholt, Duncan, and Laffey led. Behind them came cruisers San Francisco, Boise, Salt Lake City, and Helena. Destroyers Buchanan and McCalla brought up the rear. The night was pitch black. No moon, no visibility, no horizon. The advanced radars on Helena and Boise swept the waters ahead, searching for targets. Southwest of the American line, Goto's group emerged from a rain squall at high speed. Aoba led, followed by Furutaka and Kinugasa, with Fubuki and Hatsuki on the flanks. They sailed without radar and launched no scouts, believing they traversed empty seas. In reality, they were steering directly into an ambush. Interrogatory Roger. Helena detected them first. Her SG radar showed clear contacts at 27,700 yards. Plotters marked the track, the numbers tightening with every sweep. Aboard the flagship San Francisco, the older SC radar remained blank. Rear Admiral Scott, still unaware of the approaching enemy, ordered the column to reverse course. His plan required each ship to maintain course until reaching Fahrenholt's position, then wheel around as one unit, keeping the line intact. But San Francisco never waited. Her helm swung hard to port the moment the signal lamp blinked. Boise, next in line, had no choice but to follow or risk collision. She heeled sharply left. Suddenly, the three lead destroyers, Fahrenholt, Duncan, and Laffey, were no longer ahead, but sliding down the cruiser's starboard flank. Helena's Combat Information Center called the bridge. Multiple targets closing fast on a new bearing. Boise echoed the warning. Other captains reported similar plots, with bearings fanning across their scopes. Scott asked for confirmation. His radar showed only friendly signatures, with destroyers moving up his starboard side. Scott radioed Fahrenholt to check if it was resuming its forward position. The reply came, quote, "Affirmative, coming up on your starboard side." This reinforced Scott's belief that the contacts were his own ships. Convinced the reports of enemy contacts were false, he dismissed them. On Boise, the SG radar trace grew brighter as the range collapsed yard by yard. Helena's chief radar operator counted down the closure aloud. Gun crews stood ready. Within minutes, the unknown contacts would be inside torpedo range. By now, the two light cruisers knew exactly what they were tracking. Goto's bombardment group, running straight toward the American column. At 11:42 p.m., Helena's bridge crew made visual contact. Dark hulls, no recognition lights, closing rapidly. The radar officer muttered, quote, "What are we going to do, board them?" At the same time, lookouts aboard Alba spotted silhouettes to the south. Rear Admiral Goto assumed they were friendly vessels from Jojima's group. Range was under 5,000 yards, a perfect crossing the T position. Every American cruiser could bring its broadside to bear, while every Japanese gun remained limited to a forward arc. Helena's captain sensed the opportunity slipping away. He flashed San Francisco the coded query, requesting permission to open fire, quote, "Interrogatory Roger." Scott, still reorganizing his jumbled formation, returned a simple, quote, "Roger." He meant merely to acknowledge receipt of the transmission, not to authorize permission to fire. But on Helena, Scott's single Roger was interpreted as authorization. I am Alba. At 11:46 p.m., 15 6-inch rifles spoke as one. Flames strobe-lit Helena's length. Brass casings clattered across deck plates. But Goto, thinking they were taking friendly fire, hesitated, ordering signal lights flashed to confirm identity. As Alba broadcast, quote, "I am Alba." Seconds later, Boise joined, her guns cycling so rapidly that lookouts mistook the roar for automatic weapons. Salt Lake City launched deliberate 8-inch salvos, one turret after another. Even San Francisco, now spotting muzzle flashes ahead, joined the barrage, startling Scott as much as Admiral Goto aboard Alba. The first American salvos hammered into Alba before anyone aboard could react. Shells from multiple ships tore into the superstructure. Explosions devastated the bridge and communication systems. 2 of Alba's 3 8-inch turrets were knocked out. Several heavy rounds passed straight through the bridge without exploding, but the pressure wave alone cut down most of the crew present and critically wounded Goto. His fatal hesitation, mistaking the enemy for his own, had sealed his fate before the shells even struck. Shells raked across the Japanese column from port to starboard. The gunfire was so continuous that sailors on both sides described it as a single rolling thunderclap. Duncan, already separated from the formation, surged toward the flashes to launch her torpedoes, maintaining radio silence. Within moments, Iron Bottom Sound became a lattice of tracers, star shell bursts, and water geysers. Goto's ships, caught in the glare of sudden star shells and searchlights, scrambled to unmask their own guns, but the opening advantage and the initiative now belonged entirely to Scott's line. Meanwhile, Scott, on San Francisco, still uncertain of his targets, worried they might be his own destroyers. 1 minute after his convoy began firing, he ordered a ceasefire. Confused, Fahrenholt signaled for position, revealing she was almost inside the American cruiser line. Scott finally realized the ships under fire were enemies. He ordered all ships to resume firing. The damage was already substantial. Alba was crippled. Her captain deployed smoke and turned starboard, retreating into the haze. American fire shifted to Furutaka, following close behind. A shell struck her starboard torpedo tubes. The resulting fire illuminated the cruiser and drew more salvos. 9 minutes later, a torpedo from Buchanan slammed into Furutaka's forward engine room. Systems failed, speed dropped, and flames engulfed her midsection. San Francisco and Boise spotted Fubuki just 1,400 yards away. They raked the destroyer with gunfire, joined by every American ship in range. Fubuki, caught broadside and unable to escape, began to sink beneath the waves. Friend or foe? But the battle was far from over. Fahrenholt took its first hit from a Japanese shell, an airburst that shredded her radar antenna and sent a spray of metal down onto her torpedo mount. One shard pierced the torpedo's air flask, triggering it. The weapon blasted out of the tube, slammed into the forward funnel, and stuck there with its motor howling. By sheer luck, it was a dud. The propellant burnt out, and the warhead did not detonate. Moments later, more shells tore into her from both directions. American gunners, still unsure of their targets in the confusion, had joined in. One round punched through her port side at the waterline, cutting power and communications. Struck repeatedly, at least 6 times, by friendly fire, Fahrenholt turned across San Francisco's bow and drifted clear of the fight, her decks burning. Duncan was already deep in her torpedo attack when she came under fire from the Japanese, and then, mistakenly, from her own side as well. Shells ripped through her bridge, flames engulfed her forward section, and a hit to her steering gear locked the rudder hard to port. Out of control, she circled slowly as fires raged from bow to stern. The torpedo she had launched kept running toward the enemy line, but Duncan herself was finished, crippled more by American shells than by Japanese ones. With Alba disappearing behind a smokescreen, Furutaka edged into her wake to cover the flagship. Every American cruiser shifted aim. Shells pounded Furutaka, destroyed Turret 3, and ignited torpedo racks amidships. Buchanan launched 5 torpedoes. One found the forward engine room. Metal shrieked, steam vented, and the cruiser began losing power, flooding through new fractures. Kinigasa fired a torpedo spread that passed just under Boise's bow, missing by yards. Boise and Salt Lake City activated searchlights to track the retreating enemy, inadvertently guiding Kinigasa's gunners. 4 minutes later, 2 8-inch shells slammed into Boise's forward handling room. Flames erupted skyward. Nearly 100 sailors vanished in an instant, and steel plating peeled back like paper. Seawater poured through the torn hull, extinguishing the fire before it reached the powder magazines. Boise veered out of formation, retreating northward, the turrets still smoking. Kinigasa exchanged fire with Salt Lake City. Several American rounds ricocheted harmlessly, but one penetrated Kinigasa's upper works. The Japanese cruiser answered with a salvo that ruptured a Salt Lake City boiler, forcing her to reduce speed. Friendly fire continued to take its toll. More shells peppered Fahrenholt. Splinters destroyed antennas, blasted splinter shields, and sent fragments scything across her decks. Yet she remained afloat, sliding behind McCalla and Laffey to safety. Duncan, still circling helplessly, burned unchecked. Kinugasa and Hatsuyuki broke to port, choosing flight over prolonged battle. Scott ordered a course change, attempting to maintain contact, but rain squalls swallowed the fleeing ships. Reluctant rescues. The U.S. column wheeled northwest. Gunnery officers lost their targets. Firing slackened, then stopped altogether. Minutes later, Scott turned south-southwest to regroup. The brief pursuit cost Boise a shattered bow and Salt Lake City a crippled boiler. Japanese losses were heavier. Furutaka gutted and wallowing. Fubuki gone. Aoba scored and smoking. Goto mortally wounded. Yet Kinagasa's final blows had equalized the engagement enough to allow the bombardment group to escape. As dawn approached on October 13th, the battered remnants of both fleets moved to recover what they could. Jojima's reinforcement convoy, having completed its unloading at Guadalcanal, slipped away undetected. Avoiding the American warships, the Japanese transports took a southerly route past the Russell Islands and New Georgia and began the journey home. Though Aoba had sustained heavy damage, she escaped northward through the slot alongside Kinagasa. Furutaka wasn't as fortunate. Powerless from battle damage, she lost all systems and slipped beneath the waves. Destroyer Hatsuyuki recovered survivors and joined the northern retreat. On the American side, Duncan, still burning out of control, was abandoned by her crew. Admiral Scott, unaware of her fate, detached McCalla to search for her and began withdrawing with his remaining ships. 1 hour later, McCalla located Duncan adrift. Her crew attempted to salvage the ship while retrieving survivors from the surrounding water, assisted by small boats from Guadalcanal. But the effort proved futile. As bulkheads collapsed and flooding increased, Duncan sank just before noon, 6 miles north of Savo Island. Of her crew, 195 survived. 48 were lost to the sea. As American rescuers combed the waters for Duncan's survivors, they stumbled upon more than 100 Japanese sailors from destroyer Fubuki drifting nearby. At first, the Japanese refused all aid, clinging to the code of honor and the belief their navy would return. But no help came. 3 were taken aboard by force for interrogation, still convinced rescue was imminent. By the next day, the truth had set in. Isolated, exhausted, and abandoned, most of the survivors finally gave in and allowed themselves to be rescued and captured. As the sun rose on October 13th, the night's toll became clear. 2 major warships gone, hundreds of sailors lost, and survivors from both sides floated scattered across the waters surrounding Savo Island. The Battle of Cape Esperance broke Japan's streak of night victories, but at a cost. Radar helped, but confusion and poor coordination nearly threw it away. Worse, the U.S. missed key lessons: the power of Japanese torpedoes, the accuracy of their night optics, and the skill of their surface commanders. The real threat remained poorly understood, and the U.S. Marines would face the consequences in the battles still ahead across the Pacific.